Hello and welcome back to the Herbal Entrepreneur Conference. I am Yolanda Joy, and today I'm really excited to introduce you to Crystal Stevens, who is the co-founder of Flourish Farmstead and the co-founder of Tend and Flourish School of Botanicals. Crystal, I am so glad that you could come on today.
What an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that you could come on today. And so, without much more further ado, why don't you just take it away with your slides, including a bit of an introduction about who you are and what you do at Flourish Farmstead.
So I am, as you said, the co-founder of the Flourish Farmstead, which is an organization that I run with my husband, Eric Stevens. We do all sorts of things. We can't decide on one. So we have multiple diversified income streams and we really live for our passions. We operated this together for the past 2 years. And my husband recently went out and got a well-paid job with benefits at a different farm that's opening, but I'm still doing Flourish and he helps on some evenings and weekends. So it's a farm, a plant nursery, an apothecary, and then we also offer design and education. And you can find us on growcreateinspire.com. You can also reach the same website at flourishfarmstead.com. I'm also an author. I have 3 books out: Grow, Create, Inspire, Worms at Work, and Your Edible Yard. Those are available through my website and also through the Mother Earth News bookstore as well. My friend Alex Guetham and I co-founded the Tend and Flourish School of Botanicals here in the Midwest. And we have several guest instructors that we bring in, Rona on the top left and Monique on the top right. They're instructors that work with us with the school. They also have their own businesses. And so the bottom 2 photos are my co-founder and I, Alex Guetham. And part of what we do is we have an Herbal Foundations program, which is, we were hosting it out of an herb shop that had a classroom space. We were renting the space, but because of COVID, we have decreased our class sizes. This is pre-COVID. But you can see we have a really wonderful group of students that we work with, and we teach them all about medicinal herbs, herbal medicine. We also operate a farm that has a CSA collaborative. So my friend Rona and I do a CSA collaborative together where people do a subscription to our produce boxes. And then we support other farmers, specifically BIPOC farmers and women farmers. And we collaborate on these CSA boxes as well. So we're kind of a farm that also has an outdoor classroom, that also has a botanical sanctuary, a medicinal herbs patch. And this is an aerial view of the farm with a lot of our students participating in the harvest that day. We grow a variety of medicinal herbs and fruits, vegetables, flowers, and herbs, and we integrate a lot of it into lots of biodiversity intensive no-till gardening plots, and I'll get into all of that. But this is just some snapshots of what our students learn, how they harvest. The Herbal Foundations program is mainly lecture style, where they learn all about the foundational herbalism, the actions, bitters, tonics. We go over the concepts and a full out introduction to herbalism. And then we have hands-on herbal education through an apothecary apprenticeship as well. So you can just see some snapshots of, this is making yellow dock seed crackers with the seeds from the yellow dock plant, or curly dock is the same. So we're doing a lot of wild food as medicine, teaching people how to use abundant backyard weeds as food. And this is a fire cider workshop where we got our students together. We teach them how to make, things like stinging nettle pasta and stinging nettle gnocchi and things of that nature. So we use food as medicine and wild food in this really exciting way. This is just an example of some of the things that grow here that we forage for that are abundant wild foods. And we truly focus on the the ones that are absolutely abundant. So there's really, you have to think about ethical foraging and ethical herbalism and conservation herbalism when you're doing this. My friend Alex Quetham, the co-founder of the Tend and Flourish, is very big on conservation herbalism, and really, if you're going to be teaching people about herbalism, practicing ethics, a very sound thing of, a very sound set of ethics, so to speak. And also in our program, we teach materia medica. So the students learn the history and usage of the plants for healing. They create this body of collective knowledge that encompasses plants and their healing or therapeutic virtues. So they're creating materia medica and herbal monographs in the program as well to create a collective student created body of work, which is really exciting. So this is just some of the things that we teach in our program. We teach botany, plant identification, parts of the plant, plant families, Asteraceae for the dandelion here. We teach all about the ethics of foraging in terms of over-harvesting and proper harvesting techniques, but also safety, where to look for these plants in the wild, not to collect in areas that have been sprayed or along railroad tracks. Here's just some other snapshots of what we teach in our program. We go through each herb and do this materia medica so that they learn both the benefits and the parts of the plant that they use, when to grow them, how they're grown, but also the contraindications. So when not to use these plants. We go over a lot of herbal virtues. Here's just some more materia medica. You can find us on the web at growcreateinspire.com or flourishfarmstead.com and the Tend and Flourish School of Botanicals, and on social media at Tend and Flourish School, and as well as Grow, Create, Inspire and Tending the Wild Botanicals. So if you want to follow our journey and see what our students are learning, you can follow us. This is my family. This is a high tunnel that we had access to for 7 years, or actually 9 years in a row. We no longer have access. That farm has closed. We did run this farm as a CSA for 7 years. And we do miss the ability to have a high tunnel. So if you can access high tunnel space, it's very important. It is probably the pinnacle of herbal entrepreneurship. Having the ability to grow medicinal herbs from seed is really beneficial. This is my little daughter. She was born into farming. This is her at just 3 days old. You hear those beautiful stories of women in the fields harvesting, giving birth in the fields and getting right back to work. I didn't do it like that, but I did bring her with me to work 3 days later, and she was born into farming. She's a tiny little herbalist herself. She has many, many gifts as a little entrepreneur. She's an artist and a chef, and she's only 9. I had to pay her $5 to take this reenactment photo and ice cream. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to cover, the basics of homegrown apothecary, and I'm going to move really quickly because I have a lot of content to share. So I'm just going to breeze through each topic, and I will be happy to answer any questions the day of. So choosing the right seeds, you want to make sure you look at your gardening zone. And I have a zone map here. So this is the USDA. So this is for the United States. I'm sure that there's USDA's zone maps, or whatever company or organization overheads farming in your region or in your country will show you a zone map. So this determines the overnight low temperatures, which determines this specific zone where you can start your crops. So we're in I'm not sure if you can see my mouse or not, but this is where we are, kind of in the Missouri, Illinois, Western Illinois, Eastern Missouri intersection there along the Mississippi River, one of the 3rd largest rivers in the world. And it's this major life artery of the earth. And it's such an honor to live by the river. So you determine your zone. So we're about between zone 6 and zone 7, if you were to zoom in on this map, you would see little pockets of warmer or cooler temperatures. So the places that I get my seeds from are, they vary from crop to crop. However, there's BIPOC owned and operated seed companies that you can purchase from that I highly recommend. It's so important to really offer support to the BIPOC communities at this time. So there's Elohe Seeds, Indigenous Seeds Initiative, Melanated Gardens, Native Seed Search, Overflow Farms, True Love Seeds. There's Strictly Medicinals, Botanical Interests. The ones below are not BIPOC owned and operated, but these are places that you can get medicinal herb seeds from. Strictly Medicinals, Botanical Interests, Baker Creek Heirloom Seed Company, Seeds of Change, United Plant Savers, Seed Savers Exchange, and Morgan County Seed Company. I'll go back to this one. Morgan County Seed Company actually offers bulk medicinal herb seeds and culinary herb seeds for a very affordable price. So if you're growing a large crop of medicinal herb seeds, Morgan County has some really good affordable seeds. And I'm sure throughout the world, there's other options to buy medicinal herb seeds. So then we focus on when to plant, and based on the information with the zone hardiness map, you now know which zone you're in, and you know which seeds you can collect or seeds you can start. For the soil, the germination mix, there's many options, and I would go with your local germination mix if there's any companies doing local. For the farmers in our region, we prefer Vermicompost, and we all go together on truckloads of this rich Vermont compost. It has, I think, 99% germination rate. It is a phenomenal product. There's also ones at local farm and feed stores that you can get that are OMRI certified that are really good for starting seeds. And you can get ones with compost as well. So again, you can have your varieties of seeds that you start from. There's direct sowing and transplanting. Direct sowing is mainly for root crops, and transplanting, and you could direct sow flowers and native flowers as well. And transplanting is more for delicate things that you really want to baby. We always transplant tomatoes, for instance. I always transplant basil varieties, holy basil. I transplant calendula. There's a lot of things that you can, and really you can go back and look at your seed packet. The back of the seed packets always have very specific directions, whether to direct sow or transplant, and when to plant, and the days to maturity. So looking at the back of the seed packets is a good idea. And then if you wanted to plan your garden, you could look at all of the seed packets on the backs and make yourself just a handwritten chart to say what to plant when, and keep yourself organized in that way. So we always start things. Our growing season is about late February, or as soon as the ground thaws, all the way through November. So in December, January, and half of February, there's no growing that happens here. Things will start to sprout if the weather is warmer here in February, and it varies climate to climate. So what I'm mentioning in this presentation might not work for your particular region, but it's just kind of a guide or a framework to follow, and then you can do your own research based on that. For growing indoors and starting seedlings, we use these shop lights or grow lights, and we use one warm and one cool tube in the shop lights. So these can just be bought at a hardware store, and the fluorescent tubes can be also purchased affordably at the hardware store. We don't use any fancy grow lights. We just use shop lights, and we have it hanging from little chains and wires. And this is just a reclaimed shelf built out of pallets, and we lined it with plastic, greenhouse plastic that was recycled. So all of it except for the shop light itself was made from reclaimed materials. There's a number of growing things that you could plant in. So like little peat pots or plastic. We try to avoid plastic. So I'm more into reusing and recycling. So we do all of our tomato transplants, and this could be used for a lot of medicinal herbs as well, we do all of our tomato transplants in coffee bags, and I poke holes at the bottom, little needle holes, and then for drainage, and then put sand at the bottom, maybe an inch of sand just to hold it upright, because if you just put soil, it will fall over. So a little sand or rocks at the bottom, and then we actually transplant our little babies, 2-inch tall babies, into those bags, and they grow into these beautiful 3-foot tomato plants. And so it's a good way to reduce, reuse, recycle. You can have people drop off your coffee bags. I'm going so quickly, I apologize, but there's so much to cover here. So there's many methods of propagation. We just discussed planting from seed in early spring or transplanting in late spring. You could do perennial divisions. So if you have a friend with an established perennial garden, you can take divisions of that just by using a shovel to cut a small section of the plant and then burying that plant in your own garden. And root propagation, I have many pictures to showcase these types. Then there's stem cuttings and layering. So these are all the propagation methods. Of course, growing from seed, you can grow in an open flat. This is mainly if you're growing microgreens here. But if you don't have a lot of space, you could actually start things in an open flat and then separate them out to larger pots, such as this. So propagation, you could grow a tray of something, for instance, a tray in one of these open flats, and then transplant it into individual cells just to save your space. There's also stem cuttings. These are little elderberries, stem cuttings. You could do stem propagation, or you can do layering with rocks. So if you have an existing perennial, such as a culinary herb, rosemary or thyme or sage, you could do what's called layering and just put a stone, lay one of the plants down and put a stone on top, and that will form roots and create a whole new plant. So that's a nice way to do it. There's root propagation as well. So you can take little sections of the roots and then get them to develop more roots in the water, or just take the root section and transplant that into a new section of the garden. And typically they will thrive as long as you don't do it in the hot summer sun or in a very hot, dry day. You want them to have plenty of shade and water when you're transplanting in that fashion. So part of the reason that why we do the work we do is because we learned about soil loss. It takes 500 years for 1.5 centimeters of topsoil to form. And that's heartbreaking and heart-wrenching. And it feels very cryptic for the future and for our grandchildren, great-grandchildren. So focusing on building healthy soils has been our mantra in organic farming and no-till farming, regenerative agriculture, and it's sort of a way of life. So we focus heavily on building healthy soils, and also we focus on organic because that's truly necessary for the future. And a picture speaks for 1,000 words here. So which one would you rather, your children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews, or loved ones that are young ones, be harvesting from? Something that's an organic farm, no pesticides, no herbicides, safe to eat right from the vine, or something that is grown where there's gallons and gallons of pesticides and herbicides sprayed. Part of the reason we do no-till is because it's just healthier for the soil overall. You can see on the left picture, it's intensive tillage. The roots reach this hard pan and it's compacted, and the roots have nowhere to go. That is not creating an environment for microbes or mycorrhizal fungi or microbes in the soil. It has this compaction to it, and the soil life is not there. With long-term no-till, there's this network of biopores that creates an environment for the microorganisms to thrive and survive, and also allows water to go deep within the root structures and the soil, and it's just a healthier overall soil. So we focus on this one practical solution. What can we do? Because we know so much about the detriment of commercial and non-organic farming and monocultures. One practical solution is that we can just keep building healthy soil through compost, vermicompost, sheet mulching, and building raised beds. And part of how we've come to this is through permaculture. Permaculture is an ecological design lens, and some may call it a way of life, where you're looking at the earth as this living organism, this living entity, and wanting to preserve the integrity of the earth and the soil and the water. So permaculture ethics are care for the land, care for the people, and reinvest the surplus or return the surplus, also called earth care, people care, fair shares. And a lot of the work of permaculture has really focused on soil health, water health, just the overall health of all of the ecosystems. Personally, I follow the work of Elaine Ingham, and she is the soil food web soil microbiologist who really brings to light the soil, the importance of soil, the symphony in the soil happening beneath our feet. All of these things are working in symbiosis, and with the unseen eye, we can't even see what's going on, but it's so important. And one of the most amazing things that I'd ever heard was that in 1 tablespoon of healthy soil, there's more microorganisms than there are people on the planet. And that just blew me away. And I actually confirmed it with my sister, who's a PhD scientist. My sister-in-law is a PhD scientist, and she studied marine microecology as well as soil biology. And she said, yep, that's true, and we still don't know a fraction of what there is to know about soil. So we focus no-till. We focus on no-till, which also focuses on soil renewal. And nature is an amazing model to follow. So if you go on a hiking trail and you go a tiny bit off the trail without disturbing the ecosystem, scrape the soil and see what you find. Chances are you'll find this deep, dark, rich black gold is what most gardeners call it. So we tried to mimic our garden beds and our compost after the forest floor. No one ever had to go out and fertilize an old growth forest. So we try to mimic those detritus materials. There's decomposition happening, multiple layers of this organic matter. And so we mimic it in our compost pile and in our gardens. We used to have this compost drop-off location where all of our shareholders, our members of the CSA, would come and deliver their food scraps. So we would constantly be able to create this nutrient-rich fertilizer to fertilize the plants with. And compost is easy. It's intimidating if you've never tried it before, but as long as you have more browns than greens, browns are going to be your leaf litter, chip mulch. The greens are going to be the nitrogen rich things that are grass clippings or food waste. You want to have more carbon than nitrogen so that you're not creating this anaerobic environment. We focus a lot on vermicompost. So worm castings are a nutrient rich fertilizer. It's essentially just worm poop. We get mail order worms from Uncle Jim's worm farm. We started out that way, and now we have our own to divide into new piles. When my son was 5, I bought him a present, and he was expecting toys, and he opened the box and it was 1,000 red wriggler worms. And it was a funny story, but he grew an appreciation for what the worms do. We always plant comfrey, and I know many herbalists know of comfrey. We plant it as a chop and drop plant and a fertilizer plant for our garden. So I always plant comfrey near the compost, so then you can chop and drop it and add it to the compost pile to add extra nutrients, but also to line pathways. You can suppress weeds with it. You can fertilize, chop a section of comfrey and put it at the base of fruit trees as a natural fertilizer. Here's some red wriggler cocoons that have 3 to 6 baby worms in them. So we truly focus on the soil renewal, and one of the best ways to do that is to just keep adding organic matter to your beds. It's going to vary based on your location. We have a lot of oaks and hickory trees nearby, so we gather all of the fall leaves and put them in the compost bin or build new beds with them. And then we gather all of the grass clippings and do the same. We add them to beds or add them to the compost. Here's just a little example of a vermicompost bin you can make for free with pallets, and you can pop off the bottom two pieces of wood to make a little trap door. Then it's easier to harvest the worm castings. So, you know, the red wiggle worms are surface dwellers, so they're going to live on the surface of this compost bin. They're looking for the food scraps, or really they're trying to eat the nematodes and protozoa that are on the breaking down materials. But you can, since they're surface dwellers, you can put a half of a hollowed out watermelon overnight and then harvest your worm castings the next day, so you won't hurt any of the worms. They're going to be done with that bottom layer, and that's where all the nutrient rich worm castings are. And the reason you put the watermelon is because they're attracted to that, and so they'll go in the watermelon and it'll be like a little bowl of spaghetti. The worms will look like a bowl of spaghetti in that hollowed out watermelon. Here's another way if you don't want to have a compost bin, you could actually put a worm tower in each of your garden beds or medicinal herb beds. And this is a good way to do it for school gardens that don't want to attract rodents, or for places where you're not allowed to have compost due to HOA regulations, homeowners association regulations, or things of that nature. But you can compost directly into the worm tower and put a handful of worms in there, and then they're going throughout your garden bed, fertilizing for you so that you don't have to. In optimal conditions, the worms will double their population every 90 days. So if you do get into the composting with red wriggler worms, I keep saying earthworms, but I don't use earthworms to compost. I just use red wrigglers. Every time I see a picture of a large worm, I think of earthworm, but these are red wrigglers. So I just keep dividing out the piles and add them to new garden beds. Lately, I've been trying to minimize my labor time and maximize my hammock time. So I work a little smarter rather than harder these days. And so I compost directly into the garden beds, and that works out really well. And then I just take a handful of red wrigglers and sprinkle them into the garden. So they're constantly fertilizing the garden for me, and they do not disturb the roots. They're focused on the compost that is being placed on the beds. And I just dig a little trench. I mentioned that I'm along the Mississippi River. This is a view from right down the road from our house. It's where the Mississippi and Illinois rivers connect. And this is just such a beautiful part of the country. But we focus a lot on water because where we are, and I know that there's maps all around the world about watersheds and drainage basins. But here in the Midwest, all of our water flows down to the Gulf of Mexico. It goes from the Mississippi and the Missouri River drainage basins, and actually the Illinois River as well, all drain down. And so what we're doing with not what we're doing, but with what people are doing with corn and soy, and we're in the corn belt here, it's causing damage to the riverways and to the watershed. And so if you look at the watershed map, and I'm sure you can find watershed maps for your exact location, it's astounding at how much flows into the Gulf here. And unfortunately, there's these dead zones. And the dead zones are caused by an increase in fertilizers and toxic chemicals, things that we flush down our drains, things that are from stormwater runoff, pollution that's dumped into rivers from big factories, and really a lot of monocropping and commercial farms is responsible for that. So just thinking about the water is very important. So we covered seeds, soil, water, all of the things that we need to grow. Being an herbalist really gets you in the mentality of being an earth steward and a people steward. And so thinking about the big picture, Luckily, there's organizations such as Project Clear here where we live, which is the Metropolitan Sewer District, and they actually give grants for people to collect their own rainwater and to do stormwater mitigation and to help decrease stormwater runoff. There's also many methods of terracing and slowing the flow of water so that it doesn't end up in the waterways, and so that we hold the soil in place and prevent erosion. So if you just do some research for your own water organizations that promote the clean water and accessible water for all and help prevent stormwater runoff, look in your own municipalities for those resources. You might be able to find grants. One other way to hold and store water and to capture water and to prevent erosion is building Hugelkultur beds. So this is a project that we did through the Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate. It's the farm that we used to run, which is this particular section used to be an old English garden, a formal garden, and it was abandoned. So we transformed it into a pollinator habitat by building these Hugelkultur beds. And Hugelkultur is digging a trench, adding sticks, twigs. So this can be done with a medicinal herb bed, definitely. You can dig a trench and add sticks and twigs and fallen leaves. And then the picture on the right, you see the finished product where we've just collected materials from all around the land and added it in sort of a berm. And that's a wonderful way to grow pollinators. So we left that sit for an entire fall and winter. And then in the spring, it was broken down and ready to plant pollinator habitat. So we transformed it from a vacant formal garden or an abandoned formal garden to a pollinator habitat. And it's part of the Monarch flyway, which is wonderful. You can also plant medicinals like this as well. We did add red wrigglers about every 3 to 4 feet. Here's another way that you can sheet mulch. You can build healthy soil by starting from scratch. You can do a layer of cardboard, which you can get at bike shops and appliance stores, and then a layer of chip mulch, and then your fresh new soil to create a ready-to-go garden bed that's virtually weed-free, as long as you have a few layers of cardboard on there. Then there's also many other types of gardening, square foot gardening. This is occultation tarps, where you build raised beds and then prevent weed seedlings from germinating by covering them. There's also, this is called occultation, and then you would peel those back, and your roots, mainly for root crops, have a standing chance against weeds because the weed seedlings have then died for the first round of weeds. And then there's solarization, which kills bacteria and pathogens. That's just a clear plastic tarp placed over. Here's a biodegradable plastic mulch. So this is good for big medicinal herb farms. You can get biodegradable plastic mulch if you have the budget for it, or you can use burlap sacks or other free items as well. So this one, here's the before and here's the after. And there's just burlap in the pathways covered with leaf mulch, and that's biodegradable plastic mulch, which I don't feel comfortable putting plastic mulch in a landscape, but sometimes if you're trying to do your production, it is beneficial to prevent weeds. So not a weed in sight here. There's resources for building healthy soil. Mainly cover crops are really profound. So if you just purchased a plot of land in a vacant lot that maybe was abandoned, or maybe there's some demolition, or let's say you're starting a farm on some place where there was corn and soy farming or non-organic farming, you could start with cover crops. And this is tillage radishes. So you would till once and then sprinkle the seeds for the cover crops, and then they would grow up, and then you would kill them off, leave them for months, and then kill them off, and that adds organic matter, but it also helps to break up the hard pan. You can also do the same with red clover, which could be stacking functions. So you could harvest the red clover as medicine. And then there's hairy vetch and other cover crops. You can research cover crops in your particular area, which ones grow well, and they serve multiple functions. So some are nitrogen fixers, some build healthy soils, some break up the hard pan. Other resources are fallen leaves. You can get fresh new compost delivered to your site, or manures delivered to your site, or you can go pick it up from local farms. Some cities and municipalities have free compost that you can come and get truckloads of. Then there's free coffee roasting bags. Most coffee roasters that are big and commercial offer free burlap sacks, which is very beneficial to weed suppression. So there's just some photos of what you can do with coffee bags and cardboard, fallen logs, free resources, create a little herb garden. The goal is to design to increase biodiversity, increase yield, the number of pollinators, the number of perennials, joy, beauty, the soil life, to decrease the amount of labor, the pests, the diseases, the weed pressures, and soil deficiencies. So when you're designing, get to know your local ecosystems, what grows around, especially if you're focusing on new herbs that you've never grown before, or native herbs that are also medicinal. You can look at your own local ecosystems. These are just some that exist in our community, in our region. You can look at different types of ecosystems and mimic that in your own garden. So focus on the ones that are native to your region first. Attract local pollinators. They serve multiple purposes. So they're acclimated to the climate. They attract local pollinators, help prevent soil erosion. And then locally sourced medicine is stronger, more potent when harvested fresh. So, growing this echinacea, for instance, instead of buying it is so beneficial. And you're also helping with the ecosystems as well. We like to call it creating cultivated ecologies. So choose plants that thrive in your ecosystems, choose at-risk plants in your ecosystems, choose invasive, or choose plants that are non-invasive. So if you're planting, make sure it's not invasive. However, you can use the existing invasive species as medicine, and helping to harvest and eradicate that is a good idea. If you want to focus on rare and at-risk plants, there's the unitedplantsavers.org website, and they have, their mission is to protect native medicinal plants of the US and Canada and their native habitat. And this is a list, just a partial list of the at-risk plants. So you can see some of the very popular ones like slippery elm and kava kava, and even echinacea is on there, blue cohosh. Think about how we can protect these cultivated ecologies, or protect these ecosystems, by creating our own cultivated ecologies. There's also lists, your local resources will have a list of invasive and noxious plants. So it's good to know those so that you're not contributing to those. So focus on at-risk plants, and then use the medicine, use as much medicine as you can from the invasive species. So it's sort of a delicate dance here. These are really good for our particular region. This is a graphic I created to encourage people to grow these in their own backyards, because some of them are at risk and native, and some of them attract pollinators. Now, for the following part of the presentation, which is the final part, I just wanted to say that these statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration, by the FDA. They're not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease, for educational purposes only. And a lot of these medicinal herbs, it's very tricky to describe their virtues and their benefits without, a precursor of it really depends on the person, the body constitution, what you're allergic to, what your health history looks like, the inherited DNA that you have, what diseases you have had in the past or might have now, and what pharmaceuticals you're on. So this is, when I mentioned that these things are good for specific ailments, they're mainly for people who have no previous health history, people who are active and fit, drink plenty of water, who live and breathe a green lifestyle. You know, if someone is drinking 6 sodas a day, this plant might not help them. So this is mainly for people who take very good care of their temples, their bodies. So we've got so many things that we can talk about, and I'll try to breeze through these. So ginger is a phenomenal plant. It's easy to grow in a high tunnel. You need to have drip irrigation, but you can buy your seed ginger from local international stores, and you can actually plant that and cut it into little pieces and plant it, and then it will grow into a big cluster like you see here. Ginger is very fun to grow. It does take several months depending on where you live. So we planted this here in the Midwest in April and didn't harvest it until late September. So that's a long window to keep it in a high tunnel. There's so many herbs you can grow, and I'll go through some of my favorites here, just showing some other. This is our little chicken coop. So we grow a lot of things alongside of our chicken coop. We do a lot of trellising on the chicken coop as well. So one of the things that I've been researching a lot is just how we can increase biodiversity. And one great way to do that is through what's called forest gardening or guild plantings, or creating a permaculture guild bed. And we really focus that a lot on at the place that we live on and run our farm on. We focus on increasing biodiversity, decreasing maintenance, and really looking at the previous slides, the design to maximize square footage, to increase yield, all of those things. So this is a little graphic that I drew based on some other graphics that I've seen throughout the years, but this is a better rendition. This is in the book, Your Edible Yard. So you want to have many things so that you can maximize everything that you're harvesting. You want to be able to constantly harvest in your garden. And a lot of ways to incorporate medicinal herbs into these guild plantings are to focus on things that are going to be serving multiple purposes. So maybe you're attracting pollinators, maybe you're helping to dig the roots deeper into the soil, so you're breaking up the hard pan. There's so many actions that can be taken. So I focus on this guild planting as a way, and this is the guild drawing, and this is a guild in real life. So there's a peach tree, elderberry, sage, lemon balm, ground cover of culinary herbs, lots of things going on in these berms. You can see the echinacea, there's pawpaw trees and apple trees, and so many medicinal herbs interplanted in. Creating a guild is really a fun way to showcase all of these things, and it decreases weed pressure, because the more you have planted, the less weeds you'll have. And so we plant things pretty close together. Some examples of the canopy layer are fruit and nut trees. And, you know, when we look at food as medicine, fruits have so much nutrients, so many nutrients in them. So when you look at fruit trees and fruiting shrubs, Liberty apple and Asian pear are top two favorites. And then Red Haven and tart cherry are good. You'll look at your own climate and what grows well there. But these, choose the varieties that are disease resistant, pest resistant, drought tolerant, or if you're in a wet climate, wet tolerant. We love amaranth or June berries, which are also called service berries. You can have the canopy layer. I'll go back to this slide real quick and just describe the various layers. So there's the canopy layer, which is the tall tree. The middle section is the understory layer or the low shrub layer. And then we have the herbaceous layer, which is the herbaceous layer can contain anything from medicinal herbs to nitrogen fixers to pollinator attractors to Allium family. And then we have the ground cover layer, which is the layer beneath that to suppress weeds. And then beneath that would be the mycelial layer. And then there's also a vertical layer. So I'll go through the layers briefly and talk about what we grow in each layer. So low tree layer, which is the underneath of the understory layer, you've got June berries, elderberries. The American elderberry doesn't have as many toxins in the seeds, so it can be juiced. We prefer the Sambucus canadiensis variety. It can grow up to 12 feet tall, super antioxidant rich, amazing plant to have. And you can take stem cuttings from it. And from one elderberry, a 1 or 2 year plant, you can get up to 100 stem cuttings from it that can then be propagated right into the ground or into pots for sale. Gumi, this is a nitrogen fixing shrub, really delicious berries. They're kind of tart, very nutrient rich. Nanking cherry, amazing. And again, some of these might not be suited to your specific climate, but look for things that are resistant to pest and disease and grow really well and grow abundant in your area without being invasive. Aronias, some of the most powerful antioxidants on the planet, very delicious food source, amazing, makes great fruit leathers. You can make juice, jellies, jams. Got the 3 superstar berries there. Goji berries only grow as an annual here where we are, but aronias and elderberries do really wonderful. Then we've got the herbaceous layer, which I mentioned it has many things in that layer. And then we've got dynamic accumulators. So the herbaceous layer contains all of these various plants varieties. The dynamic accumulators are going to be like the comfrey. It takes the nutrients from the roots and makes it bioavailable in the leaves. So it becomes a chop and drop plant, which serves as a fertilizer. And we all know comfrey in its many uses. Comfrey is also called knit bone. So it helps as a poultice repair broken bones and broken tissues or sprains or fractures if you use it as an external poultice. A lot of herbalists use it internally as well. I tend to err on the side of caution. Then also in the herbaceous layer, we've got nitrogen fixing plants such as blue false indigo. The one in the middle is Siberian pea shrub, and then the gumi, as we mentioned before. Also in your herbaceous layer, there's pollinator attractors that are also medicinal, or some that are at risk, like the swamp milkweed is an endangered plant where we are, and so is butterfly milkweed. There's not a lot of it. People keep planting it, but it needs to keep being planted every year. So we've got pollinator attracting plants that you can put in that layer as well to help your pollinator friends. And finally, the medicinal herbs. So I'll just go through my top 12 favorite medicinal herbs, and I will skip the detail of each one, unfortunately for lack of time, but purple coneflower, wild bergamot, oh my goodness, Echinacea purpurea is a phenomenal plant, absolutely wonderful. The Angustifolia is actually also on the at-risk list. The Angustifolia is harvested mainly for its thick, fleshy roots. So the purpurea variety is harvested for the leaves, stems, and flower petals. You can use the entire plant. You can do a whole plant tincture or make tea, but it has very thin, spindly roots. So if you're harvesting for root medicine, you want to go with the Angustifolia variety, which I don't have a picture of it. The Echinacea grows in full sun, likes warm weather, blooms May through October here. It might bloom differently where you are. There are contraindications, so anyone who has allergies to the Asteraceae family should exercise caution. Also, if anyone has immunocompromised, such as immunodeficiencies or immune disorders, you might want to avoid it as well, or consult a physician. Here's the roots of the purpurea up top in the very corner. They're very thin and spindly, whereas the Angustifolia is thick and fleshy. So we know the medicinal preparations are very strong, immune boosting properties, antibacterial, antioxidant, antifungal. The whole plant can be used. And I prefer a tea or a tincture of the plant, or a decoction of the roots. Then we've got bee balm, Monarda fistulosa, amazing plant. It was called a suego by Indigenous Plains First Nations peoples, used to treat a number of ailments, and it attracts pollinators, specifically hummingbird moths and bumblebees. Many virtues, cold and flu symptoms, sore throat, makes amazing gargle. I like to prepare it as a tea or a tincture. And the growing conditions will vary based on where you are. There's also a variety called lemon bee balm, which is beautiful. It smells so fragrant and makes a lovely tea. Then we have yarrow, Achillea millifolium, wonderful plant, many virtues. It's a bleed stop herb, helps to treat cold and flu symptoms, a blood cleanser. It grows really well where we are. It might grow well where you are as well. New England Aster, beautiful, beautiful lung tonic plant. It has been used many centuries in Chinese medicines. The root has, and the flowers can be tinctured to treat lung ailments. I used it in combination with Mullen to treat my son's asthma, and he's now weaned off of all of his asthma medication due to Mullen tea, or as a result of pumping him full of Mullen tea and the lung tonic herb goldenrod and the New England Aster. St. John's wort, this is the Hypericum Perforatum. Do be careful, this one may get out of control, it may spread, but if you're harvesting all of the flowers, then it should be fine to plant in your garden. Just make sure to reduce its spreading by harvesting all of the flowers. Hypericum Perforatum, St. John's wort, it's a mood elevator. It's not to be used by people who are on SSRI medication. I call it Mama's Little Helper because it helped get me through some depressing times. Beautiful plant. Goldenrod, it's found native here and it grows in the wild here. Witch hazel, wonderful astringent herb that's very beneficial. It grows like a shrub along riverways, and you can distill it as a hydrosol to make that really wonderful healing witch hazel hydrosol. Mullen, a lung tonic herb, grows along riparian ecosystems, really amazing. It grows well as a garden plant as well. Mullen, you can use the leaves to treat lung ailments. Makes a wonderful tea, or you can tincture it, add it to an elderberry syrup or a cordial. Stinging nettles, this is the Urtica variety, Dioica. It's rich in all of these wonderful phytonutrients and minerals and potassium, zinc, and iron, wonderful for replenishing after a menstrual cycle, replenishing the body after a menstrual cycle. When I drink nettle tea, I feel like I've come back to life. It's a renewed sense of vitality, and it's also a wonderful wild food as well. Jewelweed, not to be used internally, but you can make a poultice and it treats sunburns. So if you are focusing on your herbal products on things that help treat the skin, jewelweed is a good one. So you can help relieve poison ivy. It's also often found growing near poison ivy, and it can be made into a poultice, or you can tincture it and add it to lotions. You can infuse it in oil and add it to lotions, or you can make soaps from it. A really good one for topical application to treat sunburn and minor ailments of the skin, blisters, boils, sunburn, poison ivy, insect bites. It's gorgeous too. It grows about chest high, has these gorgeous orchid-like flowers. Some other ones, I'll just breeze through these as quickly as I possibly can. Thank you for your patience. These ones are non-native to our region, but easy to grow in the garden setting, and you'll probably find luck growing them in your own garden. Tulsi, holy basil, phenomenal plant, many virtues. It has a lot of digestive tonic properties. It's antifungal. It has really wonderful ability to reduce digestive upsets. Very amazing. It's in the mint family. Lavender is so fun to grow, beautiful to grow. Angustifolia is one of the most medicinal ones, beautiful, grows really well in specific climates. Hibiscus Roselle, this one is a very fun herb to grow. It grows like okra in the Malvaceae family, also the marshmallow family. It gets really tall and produces these gorgeous calyxes, which can be used to make tea. And if you have kids in your journey, or if you work with children, it makes the most amazing natural Kool-Aid. So you just use this in a simple tea and sweeten it with honey, and it is the most beautiful, brilliant red color, and it's perfect. The Hibiscus Roselle, you can eat the leaves as well if you cook them like spinach. Hibiscus Roselle, absolutely stunning plant. Lemon balm is another good garden plant to grow. Anise hyssop attracts pollinators as well. That's up close. Lemon verbena is one of my all-time favorites. It's an annual here, but we bring it in every year as a house plant and then replant it outside every year. Calendula, phenomenal herb to grow. It makes the most wonderful infused oils, grows really prolifically. You get multiple harvests from calendula. This is just a wide array. We grew some white sage many years in a row. I try not to do cultural appropriation with plant medicine and buy it because some of it is being poached, but you can grow your own, and they do sell the seeds to it. And this is clary sage, another beautiful, amazing plant that's good for sore throats. Then we've got the amazing culinary herbs, dill, thyme, sage, oregano. You know, if you wanted an herb business to just grow your own culinary herbs, it's hard to find local culinary processed herbs that are in jars. So that's a business in itself, is growing these culinary herbs. So many to choose from, so many beautiful varieties, tried and true, loved by chefs. Fresh herbs make everything better. And then of course we've got the alliums that are also in this herbaceous layer. So we're still talking about the things that can grow in a food forest or a guild planting. The last two the last three are alliums, which can be anything from garlic, chives, onions. You can plant a variety of annual or perennial onions to deter pests and attract pollinators. Surprisingly, this is scallion tops or onion tops that a monarch butterfly was attracted to. So little surprises in the garden. Then we've got the ground cover layer. Ground cover, again, you can use the cover crop that's low growing. The ground cover is going to help suppress weeds, protect the soil, provide nutrients, possibly fix nitrogen, and multiple purposes served. So you can collect the flowers from the red clover for medicine. You can also use ground cover such as alpine strawberries, which are a food source, or regular strawberries too. And then we've got a couple more layers here, the vertical layer, which is vining plants. This is the most amazing, beautiful flower in the world, this passion flower, in my opinion. Passion flower, this is Passiflora incarnata. It actually is native to Missouri and Illinois, where I reside, but I'm sure it can grow in your climate. It is a beautiful vining plant that produces these gorgeous flowers that attract pollinators, but also these passion fruits that are so succulent and delicious and absolutely stunning. There's the passion fruit. Then we've got the mycelial layer, which you can put wine cap mushrooms, which are edible. You just straw your bottom layer, sprinkle some spawn, and months later, you'll have these beautiful edible wine cap mushrooms, and you're helping to increase the mycelial layer. You can also grow oysters on logs and shiitakes on logs as bordering your guild plantings. So that is the layers of the edible food forest garden. There's many layers that we talked about: the canopy, the subcanopy or large shrub layer, the herbaceous layer, the ground cover layer, the underground, which is the mycelial, and the vertical climbing layer. And again, that's all our guild planting. So I do have more in the presentation, but I know that we are almost out of time. So I'm just going to rush through. This is some other things that we focus on our program. We talk about, materia medica and the uses for medicinal herbs and the benefits of the medicinal herbs, how to grow them, where they're found. Then we focus on ethical wild foraging. We focus on really, truly, looking at the abundant backyard medicine and harvesting that as food sources and medicine sources. Dandelion is one of the most abundant plants on the planet, and also one of the most nutrient rich and antioxidant rich, and a very medicinal plant, and it's in our own backyards. So look at the different medicinal herbs that are in your own backyards. In our program, we also focus on recipes, how to make herbal infusions, salves, tinctures, tea blends, elderberry syrup, fire cider. We offer a variety of community-supported herbalism products like botanical self-care boxes that are made by 4 women who really are passionate about herbalism. And again, you can find my books at growcreateinspire.com, or you can go to flourishfarmstead.com. They're available at all local libraries, typically, if you request them. And you can find us on the web at Tend and Flourish School and Grow, Create, Inspire on social media. Also Tending the Wild Botanicals, that's my business partner, Alex Guitham. And that's our school, the Tend and Flourish School of Botanicals.